Welcome. I'm Travis.
And I'm Tyler, and this is Strategies for Success, a show that explores many topics while aiming to equip listeners with simple and practical lessons you can use in your everyday life.
Now join us on our journey as we reach for the impossible. Hey guys, and welcome to Strategies for Success. I'm Trav.
And I'm Tyler. So this is the second part of our two-part series we were talking about. Last week we talked about perspective. This week we're talking about speaking the language.
Yeah, so what does that really mean? I mean, as we were preparing for this, me and Tyler mentioned that we'd kind of brought this up about knowing your audience several episodes back. And this last one we talked about perspective. Well, knowing your audience, we were talking about like the crowd that you're in. You don't show up in a three-piece suit to a rodeo, it's out of place. And then last week we talked about the perspective, and that was more of the way we view things. And so today we want to talk about speak the language. It's not the way we view things. It's not the way that we look outwardly, but it's knowing your audience. It's the perspective that you have, and then being able to speak the language. Do you speak it fluently, or do we need to work on it? And so the definition from last week on perspective was a particular attitude toward a way of regarding something or a point of view. And now, how do we speak the language?
Right. So perspective's kind of the first part of it. Once you gain the correct perspective, understand where somebody else is coming from, then you can speak the language in a sense. So this one, depending on the situation, sometimes it will take a little more effort and preparation on your part. If you got a big meeting or presentation coming up, you probably want to study the topic that you're talking about, know the ins and outs, know the slang, the jargon. One thing Travis and I laugh about is some of these meetings that we go to, some people that they call and give presentations, they're trying to sell us something. They have all kinds of acronyms. And so, everybody's got their own acronyms, but if they just start throwing out acronyms, and most of the time they say them super fast too. So they're like, we'll talk to your such and such with blah, 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 blah.
Your TBM or your...
Yeah, it's just, they say it, your TSM about your blah, 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 and they just say all this stuff. And
to speak the language, it's territorial branch manager or territorial sales manager.
Yeah.
And when they throw that out, it might be the guy's first meeting. He has no idea who they're even talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, and they're used to talking like that all the time. So understanding their perspective in it's just normal language for them. But for someone that hasn't been around it, and you don't talk like that all the time, you don't know what that means. But most of the time they say it so fast too that you're a couple steps behind. So all that to say, make sure you know who you're talking to. Back to, we talked about this previously, but know who you're talking to and speak the language that they're going to understand. That's going to be way more effective than trying to look cool or look impressed with that person and act like you know everything. Because a lot of times at first when I went into sales, I was kind of intimidated, and I've learned to speak the language a lot better, but we sell farm equipment and lawn mowers. And so one thing that really was overwhelming to me at first was everyone would start throwing out, I got an old 8260, or they start saying all these old model numbers and stuff. And at first I had no idea what they're even talking about. So I kind of had to just, nod and smile. But I've learned that over the years. But that is another thing about knowing your language. If I just started saying random numbers and act like I knew the language, then they're going to know pretty quick I didn't know how to speak their language.
Yeah, and you remember this too, like how Tyler probably felt when he was first in sales. It almost makes you feel like you're unqualified or stupid.
Right. Very intimidating.
Yes. And so remember that when you're speaking to somebody or speaking to another crowd, if you don't know the language. So how do you know the language? Well, how do you learn a language, right? First, you got to study it.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to that know your audience, right? Yep. So you got to know the audience. You got to know what language that they're speaking. You got to know what perspective they're coming from. It probably wouldn't be good to get up and speak the language at a conservative event and get up and speak about liberal candidates.
Right.
You got to know the perspective. Yes, as we mentioned last week, you want to know their perspective and you want to try to see things from their perspective, but you got to speak the language. And so I mentioned this last week, and I try to tell our staff at work too, when you got a customer that calls, they don't live in lawnmower world. We live in lawnmower tractor world every day. And so that's the norm for us. But this guy, he might be a farmer and he knows his tractor, but he don't know what all the different models and everything about them. And then you got the guy that just wanted to mow his yard and he don't need to know 5,000 different models. And so he goes, dude, I just need the part that makes the blade turn. And you're like, the spindle. And I've even heard people say that, and you're like, that guy, I guarantee you, feels like an idiot, on the other end of the phone. Or, do you have your model and serial number? And it's like, you got that, I can't help you. And it's just real bruff. And we mentioned this last week in the perspective. That guy just needs to get his lawnmower fixed, and he's there to see it we want to make sure that we're seeing it his way and speaking the language. Be like, what are we talking about here? Is this a piece underneath the machine, whatever? And now take your field. What do you do? Are you a plumber? Are you a pastor? Are you you fill in the blank. And I guarantee if you had a conversation with me and Tyler, we may not know what you're talking about. The one that always gets me is when we have our IT guys come and they're you need to do blah, 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 blah. And there'll be a whole long list. And I'm like, dude, I just want my computer to work.
Yeah. And I've mentioned in the past, I like to play golf. So sometimes I like to look at all the golf clubs and kind of know all about the gear and that type of stuff. So whenever I start playing with somebody new or someone I haven't played before or something, sometimes someone will be like, hey, what kind of club did you get? And I'll just be like, oh, I got a Titleist driver. And then then if they just say, okay, they don't maybe play a lot of golf, but then they're like, oh, which one did you get? And they start naming off the model numbers or what kind of shaft you got in there. Then you realize, hey, this guy knows how to speak the language, and then you can start diving in. But sometimes if you just spring that off the jump, then you look a little crazy.
Yeah, maybe look a little cocky.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Oh, look what I got.
Exactly.
And I think that's it. He just nailed it right there. So you got to fill it out and know who you're speaking to. You got to know your audience and then know how to speak the language. We get guys that come in that know about lawnmowers. Maybe they're commercial mowers or guys that are professional custom hay balers. They're going to know their equipment a lot of times better than we do because we know all the models and they know the specific models that they need.
Yep.
And so make sure you're speaking the language that they understand. And I guarantee you when you start doing that, they'll reciprocate.
Oh, yeah. And Travis had mentioned earlier, he was talking about, can you imagine being in another country or somewhere else that everyone else is speaking a different language and you have no idea what people are saying? That'd be pretty overwhelming.
I'll tell you something that I've experienced here recently. And we ended up hiring someone that could speak another language, primarily Spanish, because we get so many people in there. And you're not obligated to have someone that speaks Spanish, but I guarantee you the guys that come in, they're looking for parts. As soon as someone starts speaking Spanish, it's like a breath of fresh. They're like, oh, they know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And what made me want to do this was me and the guy I work with, we ordered a pizza one day. I was out running errands and we ordered it from a gas station. And there's a local chain that does pretty good pizza. And so there was two on the same street. And so I accidentally went to the wrong location to get the pizza. And I'm standing there looking kind of like an idiot because I'm like, hey, where's my pizza? And they're like, we don't have no orders. Well, when I left, I didn't think too much about it. I thought, they didn't have no orders. It's not that big of a deal. I drive 3 miles down the road and all the lawn mowing crews, all the guys that spoke Spanish, there's a line of them getting food at this other place. And I thought, that's really weird. The other place had no orders, same pizza. But down there, they spoke the language. And so all those guys went down there to order their food because can you imagine trying to go and order your food and you don't speak English?
Right.
It's tough. So remember to speak the language.
Exactly.
All right, you ready for the challenge?
I think we're ready for it.
All right. So we're going to challenge you to learn a language. And I'm going to make this one very difficult.
Learn an entire language by next week.
Yeah, no, not quite that. But if you're married, I want you to learn your spouse's language. Maybe that's the love language. Maybe that's and so what is a love language? Well, my wife, we sat down and visited and talked about this at one point, and she said, when you do things to help me around the house, that says I love you. And for me, someone acknowledging, saying, "Hey, good job." That's a way to speak my language. And so your spouse, maybe it's your friend, maybe it's a coworker, you pick the person and start working on their language. All right. So that could be a guy likes food. You show up with a breakfast sandwich. You're probably speaking the same language. So if you want some more clarification on the challenge on how to learn the language, definitely can fill in the comments on any of our platforms and we'll be there to reply. But we've given you some words of wisdom. We've given you a challenge, and now it's time.
Now it's time to execute.
That's right.
Thank you for learning with us.
Join us next time as we reach for the impossible. I'm Travis,
And I'm Tyler.
and this is
Strategies for Success.